Want to know the shocking truth behind Mercury's Tower of Power? These legendary six-cylinder giants dominated American waterways throughout the late 70s and 80s. Remember how these engines were so distinctively tall that some boats had to be specially modified just to harness their insane power? But here's what most people never realized. The very design that made them instantly recognizable also made them one of the most polarizing engines in marine history. While everyone was mesmerized by that distinctive inline-six sound and impressive acceleration, these engines were teaching the entire marine industry crucial lessons. This is when we learned the balance between performance and practicality that would reshape outboard design forever. Look, before we dive into the glory days, let's address what every marine mechanic from the era knows all too well. These engines had their quirks. Sure, they looked absolutely incredible mounted on the back of your weekend racer, standing tall like monuments to American horsepower. And yes, that distinctive sound could make any gearhead's heart skip a beat. But ask any honest boat owner from the era, and they'll tell you about the unique relationship that came with owning one of these powerful machines. The thing is, Mercury was pushing boundaries with these engines. They were selling performance at a level that hadn't been seen before in the outboard world. But we're getting ahead of ourselves here. The story of Mercury's Tower of Power begins in the mid-1970s, during an era when bass fishing was transforming from a regional pastime into a nationally televised professional sport. Mercury Marine, based in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, was watching the horsepower race intensify as boat manufacturers built increasingly faster bass boats. The market was demanding more power, and Mercury's engineers responded with something unique. Instead of following the V-engine trend that was becoming popular, Mercury developed their inline-six configuration. This wasn't just about being different. The inline-six design offered specific advantages. The configuration allowed for a naturally balanced engine that produced smooth power delivery throughout the RPM range. The vertical arrangement of six cylinders gave these engines their distinctive height, earning them the Tower of Power nickname that became legendary on lakes across America. The inline-six engines were offered in multiple configurations throughout their production run. The lineup included 150, 175, and 200 horsepower models, with Mercury later introducing more powerful versions. What made these engines special wasn't just the power output, it was how they delivered that power. The long crankshaft and firing order of the inline-six created a unique torque curve that gave these engines exceptional hole-shot performance, getting heavy bass boats up on plane quickly. The engineering behind these engines reflected Mercury's commitment to performance. They featured advanced porting designs for two-stroke engines of that era, with exhaust tuning that helped extract maximum power from each combustion cycle. This attention to performance details made them particularly attractive to competitive bass anglers who needed every advantage they could get. Hey, if you're enjoying this deep dive into marine engineering history, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because what's coming next about how these engines revolutionized competitive bass fishing is absolutely fascinating. Throughout the late 1970s and into the 1980s, the Tower of Power became synonymous with professional bass fishing. Watch any bass tournament footage from that era, and you'll spot these distinctive tall engines on boat after boat. The professional bass fishing world was exploding, with tournaments being broadcast on television and sponsorship money flowing into the sport. The popularity of these engines went beyond just professional anglers. Weekend warriors wanted the same equipment the pros were using, and the Tower of Power became the must-have engine for serious bass boats. Boat manufacturers began designing hulls specifically to handle the power and weight distribution of these inline-six engines. The marriage of lightweight aerodynamic bass boats with these powerful engines created combinations that could reach speeds previously unheard of in bass fishing. What really set these engines apart was their distinctive sound. Unlike the higher-pitched scream of smaller displacement engines or the rumble of V configurations, the inline-six produced a unique exhaust note that became its calling card. You could identify a Tower of Power by sound alone from across the lake. This auditory signature became part of the mystique. It was the sound of serious fishing power. The torque characteristics of these engines made them particularly well suited for bass fishing applications. The smooth, predictable power delivery allowed anglers to maintain precise boat control when working through structure or positioning for the perfect cast. This wasn't just about going fast, it was about having complete control over your boat positioning, which is crucial in competitive fishing. But here's where the story gets really interesting. While these engines were dominating on the water, they were also developing a reputation that would follow them for decades. Stick around, because understanding the reality of living with a Tower of Power reveals why these engines remain so controversial among marine enthusiasts. The Tower of Power represented more than just raw horsepower. It showcased Mercury's approach to two-stroke technology at its peak. These engines incorporated features that were advanced for their time. The loop-charged two-stroke design, combined with tuned exhaust systems, allowed these engines to produce impressive power from relatively simple mechanical designs. Mercury's inline-six engines became the platform for numerous innovations in the bass boat world. The power these engines provided pushed boat designers to create hulls that could handle higher speeds safely. This symbiotic relationship between engine manufacturers and boat builders drove rapid advancement in bass boat design throughout the 1980s. Boats became lighter, more aerodynamic, and better able to handle the speeds that Tower of Power engines made possible. The racing heritage of Mercury Marine also influenced these consumer engines. Technology and knowledge gained from Mercury's racing programs filtered down to the production inline-six engines. This racing DNA showed in the engine's ability to withstand extended periods at wide-open throttle, something that was crucial for bass anglers racing to distant fishing spots during tournaments. Now let's talk honestly about what it was really like to own one of these engines. Two-stroke technology in the 1970s and 1980s came with inherent characteristics that modern four-stroke owners might find challenging. These engines required pre-mixed oil or relied on oil injection systems that needed regular attention and maintenance. The oil consumption was significant. These engines were designed for performance, not efficiency. The cooling systems on these engines required attention, particularly in shallow or silty water conditions. The water pump impellers needed regular replacement, and the thermostats could become problematic if not maintained properly. Smart owners learned to carry spare impellers and thermostats, as these relatively inexpensive parts could leave you stranded if they failed. Starting procedures for these carbureted two-strokes could be particular. Cold starts required proper use of the choke and throttle position, and flooding was a real possibility if the procedure wasn't followed correctly. Each engine seemed to have its own personality when it came to starting, and owners often developed specific routines that worked for their particular engine. The vibration levels of these large displacement two-strokes were notable. While the inline-six configuration was naturally balanced, the firing pulses of a two-stroke engine created harmonics that could be felt throughout the boat. This vibration could loosen fittings and fasteners over time, making regular inspection and tightening of components a necessary part of ownership. Owning a Tower of Power was an exercise in understanding two-stroke engine characteristics and accepting the maintenance they required. These engines demanded respect and regular attention. Ignore their needs and they'd remind you quickly why preventative maintenance matters. The carburation systems on these engines, while relatively simple by today's fuel injection standards, required periodic adjustment and cleaning. 6 carburetors meant 6 times the potential for issues if maintenance was neglected. Ethanol in modern fuels has made this even more critical for the surviving engines still in use today, as fuel system components can deteriorate rapidly if not properly maintained. Spark plug maintenance was crucial and frequent. With 6 cylinders firing in a 2-stroke configuration, spark plugs could foul if the engine was operated at low speeds for extended periods. Savvy owners learned to carry multiple sets of plugs and became proficient at reading plug condition to diagnose running issues. The phrase, "when in doubt, change the plugs," became a mantra among Tower of Power owners. The lower units on these engines, while robust for their era, required regular service to maintain reliability. The gear oil needed changing at specific intervals, and the heavy torque these engines produced meant that gear lash and bearing wear were real concerns for high-hour engines. Water pump maintenance was absolutely critical. These powerful engines generated significant heat, and cooling system failures could result in catastrophic damage remarkably quickly. Parts availability has become increasingly challenging as these engines age. While Mercury maintained parts support for many years, finding original equipment manufacturer parts for these vintage engines now often requires searching through old marine dealership inventory or connecting with other enthusiasts who might have stockpiled components. This scarcity has created a cottage industry of specialists who rebuild and maintain these classic engines. The Tower of Power ownership experience taught many boaters valuable mechanical skills. These engines came from an era when owners were expected to perform much of their own maintenance, and the relatively simple mechanical nature of two-stroke engines made this feasible. Many current marine mechanics cut their teeth working on these inline-six engines, learning diagnostic skills that translated well to all marine engines. Despite their maintenance requirements, these engines developed an incredibly loyal following. Owners who understood and accepted the maintenance requirements were rewarded with impressive performance and that unmistakable inline-six sound. The key to successful Tower of Power ownership was treating maintenance as a ritual rather than a chore. These engines rewarded attention with reliability and performance. Today, finding a well-maintained Tower of Power is becoming increasingly rare. These engines have achieved something of a cult status among vintage outboard enthusiasts who appreciate their historical significance and are willing to invest the time and money required to keep them running. The surviving examples are often lovingly maintained by owners who understand their place in marine history. The challenge of maintaining these engines has created a specialized knowledge base among enthusiasts. Online forums dedicated to vintage Mercury engines have become repositories of technical knowledge, with members sharing everything from carburetor tuning specifications to sources for hard-to-find parts. This community has become essential for keeping these engines alive, as the tribal knowledge they possess often exceeds what's available in service manuals. Some marine shops have developed specialities in maintaining and rebuilding these classic engines. These specialists understand the quirks and requirements of vintage two-stroke technology and have accumulated the tools and parts inventory necessary to keep Tower of Power engines running. Their expertise commands premium prices, but for owners committed to keeping their engines original, these specialists are invaluable. The environmental regulations that have transformed the marine industry mean that engines like the Tower of Power could never be produced today. Two-stroke engines, particularly large displacement ones, produce emissions that don't meet modern standards. This regulatory reality makes the surviving engines interesting historical artifacts, representatives of a different era in marine propulsion. The lessons learned from the inline-six engines influenced Mercury's future development significantly. Mercury Racing, the company's high-performance division, built upon the foundation of knowledge gained from these engines. The understanding of how to extract maximum performance from an outboard, refined through years of Tower of Power production and support, became institutional knowledge that influenced future designs. Modern Mercury racing engines, while vastly different technologically, carry forward some philosophical approaches pioneered during the Tower of Power era. The emphasis on torque production, the distinctive exhaust note that makes Mercury engines recognizable, and the focus on acceleration performance all have roots in the inline-six experience. The transition from carbureted two-strokes to modern four-stroke and direct injection two-stroke technology required Mercury to reimagine their approach to performance. However, the fundamental understanding of what performance boaters wanted, quick acceleration, reliable power, and that distinctive Mercury sound, came from lessons learned during the Tower of Power era. Today's Mercury racing engines benefit from computer-aided design, advanced materials, and electronic control systems that weren't available in the Tower of Power era. However, the basic mission remains the same: provide maximum performance for competitive applications. The DNA of competition and performance established with engines like the inline-six continues in modern Mercury racing products. So, what's the real truth behind Mercury's Tower of Power? These engines represented a specific moment in marine history, when performance was king and environmental regulations were minimal. They were products of their time, powerful, charismatic, and demanding of their owners' attention and mechanical sympathy. The Tower of Power engines weren't perfect by any means. They required regular maintenance, consumed oil and fuel at rates that would shock modern boaters, and produced emissions that wouldn't meet today's standards. But they also provided performance that helped establish bass fishing as a professional sport, and gave recreational boaters acceleration and speed that had previously been unavailable in production outboards. Understanding these engines requires appreciating the context of their era. In the 1970s and 1980s, the expectations for marine engines were different. Owners expected to perform regular maintenance, carry spare parts, and develop mechanical knowledge. The Tower of Power engines delivered spectacular performance in exchange for this involvement, creating a relationship between owner and machine that's largely absent from modern computer-controlled engines. The influence of these engines extends beyond their production run. They pushed the entire marine industry forward, establishing performance benchmarks that competitors had to match. They helped create the modern bass boat industry, as hull designs evolved to handle the speeds these engines made possible. They also taught the industry valuable lessons about the importance of balancing performance with reliability and ease of maintenance. The Tower of Power remains an important chapter in American marine history. These engines represented the pinnacle of carbureted two-stroke outboard technology, delivering performance that captured the imagination of a generation of boaters. While they required dedication from their owners, they rewarded that dedication with performance and a visceral experience that modern engines, for all their advantages, rarely match. Today's outboard engines are marvels of efficiency, reliability, and environmental responsibility. They start easily, run quietly, and require minimal maintenance compared to their predecessors. But something was lost in this evolution: the direct mechanical connection between operator and engine that made every trip an adventure and every successful day on the water a small triumph. For those who owned them, the Tower of Power engines remain memorable not despite their demands, but because of them. These engines required their owners to become mechanically knowledgeable, to plan ahead, and to accept that performance came with responsibility. In our modern world of push-button convenience, there's something admirable about machines that demanded engagement and rewarded knowledge with performance. The surviving Tower of Power engines serve as rolling museums, preserving a piece of marine history for future generations. When one of these tall inline-sixes fires up at a boat ramp today, heads turn not just because of the distinctive sound, but because people recognize they're witnessing a piece of history, an echo from an era when horsepower was king and the journey mattered as much as the destination. If you made it through this complete history of Mercury's legendary inline-six engines, you're definitely the kind of person who appreciates marine history and engineering. Hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, and drop a comment below sharing your own Tower of Power memories or experiences with classic outboards. We read every comment and love hearing your stories from the golden age of bass boating. Until next time, keep those props turning and those memories alive.